Javier Becerra, chairman of the caucus, joined by the vice chairman, Joe Crowley from New York. We finished a meeting where we heard principally a presentation by the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Secretary Work, on the upcoming bill on the floor in the House dealing with the Department of Defense. And surprising to many of us, because typically defense is an area where Democrats and Republicans alike understand the importance of our national security and the need to be strong. But in this case, we heard a presentation directly from the Department of Defense saying that this bill is the wrong bill to put for a vote because it's the wrong way to invest in America's security and to move our country forward as we try to continue to make progress in being the leader when it comes to economic recovery. The president has made it very clear that the bill that Republicans have put together that will be on the floor this week to deal with the Department of Defense's authorization, budget authorization, is not the right way to go, because it not only places priorities where the president said it's not the most critical, but it also overspends in ways that put at risk other DOD priorities. And we think that given the presentation that Secretary Work made today to members of the Democratic caucus, and given the words that have been issued by the president and leaders in the Pentagon, that it would be wise for our colleagues on the Republican side to put together a defense authorization bill which really will have strong bipartisan support and get the signature of the president. I mention all of that because it's important for us to have security. We see what happens when something happens that is unexpected. Last night, a tragedy involving a couple hundred, 200 or 300 passengers who were on an Amtrak train headed to New York, suffered, in some cases, death, grave injury. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of the Americans who have lost their lives. I believe the count is 6, and there are over 140 who have been injured. And you never know what's going to happen, but you have to be ready. And we don't know yet the circumstances behind the derailment of that Amtrak train, but certainly we want to make sure we're always doing whatever we can to make sure that Americans are safe, whether it's riding on a train or whether it's knowing that their military forces will be there to protect our national security. And so we have to do everything we can to make sure we're ready. And that's why we can't be playing games with something as important as the funding and appropriations and authorization for the Department of Defense. I will mention one other issue, and that is, of course, that we are watching our Republican colleagues return to their social agenda at a time when we're less than 3 weeks away from watching money for our transportation programs expire. All roads, bridges, highways, the construction projects that require our gas tax money to go back to those communities to pay for those projects, that's about to expire unless Congress acts to reauthorize that highway trust fund money. And here we are talking about abortion in a bill that would strip women of their rights, would put forward a bill which is clearly unconstitutional, which will not get a president's signature. And all this time we are using on the congressional calendar to do a social agenda instead of doing the work of the American people that keeps our roads in business, our bridges under repair, and our Americans who work in that industry, the construction industry, employed. And so we hope that we get back to doing the real business that the people expect us to do. You don't create over 240,000 jobs, or excuse me, 220,000 jobs last month by doing social agenda items. You create jobs by working with the private sector to make sure that Americans are working. And we hope that we can continue working with the president to put more people to work, to get America moving. And you don't do it by doing things that have no chance of becoming law. It's time to get a DOD authorization bill that we can pass bipartisanly, and it's time to get back to getting to the economy and getting people to work rather than moving on a very extreme social agenda. With that, let me turn now to the Vice Chair, Joe Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me first express my condolences to the 6 known victims of the tragic accident derailment of the Amtrak train between Washington and New York City, and to the people of Philadelphia who are dealing with the search and the rescue operation. 140 people, as the chairman mentioned, were injured. This is a rail line that I use, that many members of Congress use, that when you think about it, the millions of Americans who use this line throughout the year, one of the most popular rail lines in the United States of the Amtrak system, one of the most successful aspects of the Amtrak rail system as well. We've seen the chaos that has ensued since then. No service on that line between Washington and New York, and that has had a devastating impact short term. It is a reminder of the investments that need to be made to continue to make sure our tracks and our roads and bridges are in place. But right now, I think the focus needs to be on the loss of life, the injuries that are sustained, and the need to get that operation up and running again as soon as possible. I also want to just point out the second tragedy in less than 2 weeks or so of the people of Nepal, and another devastating earthquake. In my constituency, I have a very large Nepali constituency, as well as other districts throughout the country. The suffering, the pain and suffering that these people have gone through here in the States is heartbreaking. Not knowing whether or not their loved ones are alive or, again, injured is just heartbreaking. The lack of their ability to communicate with their loved ones is devastating. So our thoughts and prayers go out to the people of that region as well. We came to Congress to make life for the American people better. And I continue to struggle to find ways in which my Republican colleagues are working in that vein. There's been an unending list of manufactured crises here in Washington. And that's with everything that is going on around us, whether it be man-made crisis or natural disasters, both here in the States and throughout the world. I've said this continuously. You've heard this almost like a broken record. But we need to stop, the Republican Congress needs to stop creating more crises for the American people. And once again, here we are looking at a deadline of the end of the month. It's unfortunate. The Highway Trust Fund ought not to be dealt with in this way. We should have more foresight. We need to get back to doing business where we're looking a year and a half, 2 years out before the expiration date, and really thinking and planning and giving states and local governments the tools that they need to make the proper investment in infrastructure, in tunnels, roads, bridges, rail, etc., mass transit. That's what we ought to be doing here in Washington, and again, not continuing to create manufactured crises for the American people. They need a break.
Questions?
Yes, Congressman, you mentioned economic issues. We saw the Senate yesterday attempted to take up a trade package, and there's signs that they may find a way through that roadblock. Do you think they'll move it along, or is there talk in the House of doing the same thing, or letting Democratic members weigh in on this? Have the Republicans presented that to you? Will it happen before May recess?
I think the Republican leadership in the Senate is finding what happens when a bill is crafted that doesn't have the full participation of the Democratic members in the Senate, as we find in the House as well. And in the Senate, they have to get to a certain vote margin in order to be able to proceed forward. Whether they get there or not will depend on how much cooperation there can be. But certainly some of the issues that were brought up yesterday that caused the bill from moving forward were very important to the American people. American people want to have the confidence that trade deals will work, not just for foreign companies or for foreign countries, but for Americans here, American workers, American businesses. And many of the items that were raised by Democrats, Senator Reid in particular, are very important to the American people. We want to make sure that we don't find that these companies or the countries where these companies are doing business are cheating. And if you don't have the confidence that you can enforce the provisions of a deal, why would you even have that arrangement with that country? It's like trying to buy a car or a house with someone you can't trust. You wouldn't do that, and so we can't expect the American people to want to participate in a trade deal where the cheaters will continue cheating at the expense of American workers and American businesses. And so we'll see if the Senate can move forward. It could easily move forward if there were some good common ground reached on how to put forward a trade deal that has enforcement capabilities and to make sure that the cheaters go out of business.
But no plans for the House?
From what we know, the House Republican leadership is saying that the Senate must act first. I believe the House Republicans are having trouble rounding up the votes they need to pass their bill here in the House of Representatives as well. And Joe, I don't know if you wish to comment.
I would just make a comment. I don't pretend to know just what the will of the Senate will be. I suspect that at some point my history here, my 17 years history here, is that they'll probably find a way to get this through at some point. The real question is whether or not they can actually get a compromise from the Senate and the House passed, whether or not the things that are added in a Senate bill will be found untenuous by the House majority, the Republicans, is a question. But the real question I have is, why do we have to do this now? Why can't we do a jobs bill, an infrastructure bill? Put Americans back to work. Get Americans working again. We see, and this is not the panacea, passing an infrastructure bill is not the cure for all the ills of America, but boy, it will go a long way to give people the sense of hope and opportunity. HOPE, that the President talked about in both his campaigns, to give those folks the faith that they have opportunity in this country as well. As someone who has supported trade agreements in the past, I think right now the focus needs to be on America and giving hope and opportunity for millions of Americans who want to once again believe in this country and all it has to afford to its constituents.
Republicans are saying that they could lose up to 60 of their own members, which would mean Democrats would need 30 or more members to vote for a TPA bill. Is that a feasible reality in your guys' conference right now? You've had the president, you've had nearly every cabinet member up here. You have Ms. Delora saying that she is very confident it's going to fail. Is it even a conversation that TPA can pass in the House?
You know, that you get the majority, you strive to win the majority in an election so you can govern, so you can run the House of Representatives or the Senate and govern. For the Republican leadership in the House to be saying, we may lose 60 of our 240 some odd members, which means we can't pass a bill, to then have to turn to the minority, which the Republican majority was unwilling to work with to try to fashion the bill, it seems an odd way to try to do business. That's not the way any small businessman or woman would run their company on Main Street. That's not the way you would run the largest government and economy in the world, to say, well, I can't do it. I got elected to govern, to lead, and I can't do it. So I need you to help me pass what I produced without your help, and help me pass it. I don't believe that the Republican leaders should count on Democrats to bail them out of their bill, which was not crafted in a way that would get a strong bipartisan vote. And there's a way to get a strong bipartisan vote where I think all of us in Congress would want to participate and be a yes, and that is to engage everyone so that we all have a say, rather than say, do it my way or hit the highway. Well, I think at this point, even Republican members are hitting the highway on the Republican crafted Trade Adjustment Authority bill.
I'll just add to that, you only have to look at what happened in the committee, and both the chairman and myself are members of the Ways and Means Committee, how the bills were just ramrodded through. We made reasonable, I think, suggestions for amendments to make them better. They were just completely set aside, weren't given, I think, any real credible viewing by the majority. I think to some degree that same attitude exists in the Senate, although I think they're coming to the realization under the rules of the Senate and the need for 60 votes that maybe there's a possibility they might have to listen more to the Democrats in the Senate. Having said that, I agree wholeheartedly with the chairman. The onus and responsibility of the majority is to pass their agenda. not to look to minority votes for it. If they want the minority votes, they need to listen to us, and they need to make the adjustments and changes that are necessary that we want to see in that legislation if they expect to see substantial support from our conference.
Last question.
Yes, last question.
What do you think are the chances of getting enough GOP votes against the NDAA?
Now we're talking about the defense authorization bill again. By the way, I have to make a comment that Republicans are going to put a bill on the floor that's unconstitutional and deprives a woman of the rights she has to exercise her best choices and options on how to move forward with her life. And sounds like the Republicans believe they have a majority to pass that bill. But while they can pass a bill that's unconstitutional on the floor of this House, they can't pass a bill that the president says he agrees with them is important to do. And Democrats agree would be important to do if it's done the right way. And so I go back to the question again. If you're given a chance to govern by being given votes in an election to have a majority, then isn't it your responsibility to govern in a rational way, in a sensible way that lets you gather the votes you need on a bipartisan basis instead of trying to do things on a partisan basis all the time? And when you see that things are failing, you then turn to the other side and say, oh, guess what? Now I do need your help. On the defense authorization bill, same thing. Last time we were in session, a couple weeks ago, we had a bill for veterans to authorize our programs and our investments with veterans, health-wise, and all other services for Americans who served and are now veterans. That bill was plagued by partisan tinkering. Democrats voted against the bill. The president said he will veto that bill. And so we know that that's not going to become law, yet our Republican colleagues refused to work on a bipartisan basis across the aisle to make sure we had a good bill for our veterans. 70,000 veterans are going to be left out of services by that legislation that Republicans have pushed forward. We think there's a better way. The Department of Defense's bill, there's a better way. And so we believe there's a chance to get a strong bipartisan vote. I don't think this bill is the one that will do it. Joe, did you want to?
No,
Well, we'll close with that. Thank you all very much.